it's gone. Brody Kostecki is the king of the mountain. He got it pulled up. He made that. He is now in 2024 the Repco Supercars Champion. And what a drive today.
G'day guys, James Pavey from supercars.com, continuing with our summer cooldown season review series brought to you by City Rural Insurance Brokers. I've got my mate Zach Dowdle here. Mate, how you going?
Good, thank you, Paves.
So Zach, we're getting into the midfield of the pack, and it feels a bit remiss for me to say that because one of their drivers at the very least was very much towards the pointy end. We're talking about Matt Stone Racing, a massive breakout years for these guys, a year after another breakout year. It just seems like they're on that trajectory, aren't they?
Well, Matt Stone Racing, two-time race winner this year. Imagine saying that at the start of the year and actually believing it. They've been another one of these really fun teams to watch throughout the season, and in particular, Nick Percat, this amazing career resurgence that I don't think a lot of people saw coming, but save for Matt Stone Racing and Nick himself. So much to unpack with these guys. It's been a really great year for them.
Feel good story of the year, Nick Percat's resurgence?
I'd have to say so. It's been, he came out and looked really solid at the Bathurst 500, and then you go to the Australian Grand Prix and all of a sudden he's fending off the Red Bulls for a really impressive race win on, barely enough fuel to make it to the finish line, and then to get back around to the podium, he had to get pushed back. So, and then he repeated the dosage once again in Tasmania, and I think that one would have been really, really sweet for Nick Percat, especially to hold off his former teammate Chaz Mostert and Walkinshaw Andretti United. It's no secret that those two parties parted ways in very acrimonious circumstances, and you only have to look at Nick Percat's victory lane interview at the Australian Grand Prix to figure out that. But to hold off Chaz and the Walkinshaw Andretti United Mustang, and Chaz was absolutely flying that day too on an alternate and aggressive tyre strategy. And Nick just drove a very calculated race, and his first multi-win season since 2020 with Brad Jones Racing. It's been an outstanding year, and we've seen once again that Nick Percat really has this knack of extracting incredible levels of performance from perhaps smaller and lesser funded teams than the biggest teams in the lane.
It's an impressive point you raise as well. You think he goes to a team like WAU and it just didn't work out for him, unfortunately. It seemed like this big fairy tale and it just didn't eventuate. And you raised a good point about the interview at the Grand Prix. We were lucky enough to speak to him as well in length after that race win, and he spoke about, I never felt like I lost it. I just didn't really have the right car underneath me and just never really worked out. Obviously, Chaz was the star guy at that team, but I think the point about Nick, which is important to point to, is he's a guy who probably feels like he deserves to be a lead driver at any race team he goes at, and that was proof in the pudding. That win at the Grand Prix, holding off the two Charging Bulls, that was something else, but we have to make a point as well. MSR, they won that race in Tasmania with that pit stop, and that was justified by them making the final of the Pertec Pit Stop Challenge. So a big year for those guys on and off the track as well, and that's also extended to Cameron Hill as well. His first season last year was really, really tough. That big crash at Turn 8 at Adelaide, that's caught out a lot of guys, but unfortunately it caught him out this year, which we'll get to that in a second. But he's a guy who's really, really improved. 10 positions year on year in the championship, that's a massive jump.
I feel like he's really stood up to the challenge of having someone like a Nick Percat as a teammate. Jack LeBrock last year as a teammate, he's certainly no slouch either, and winning Matt Stone Racing's first ever race in Darwin last year. But Nick's really, you don't win Bathurst without some level of talent, and for Nick to do that on debut back in 2011 as well, I think really just further exemplifies the caliber of driver we're talking about here. And Cam kept Nick honest in qualifying all year too, so it's not like Nick really pulled that far ahead on raw speed alone. But I think Nick's his experience in races, I think, really showed, especially with the two incredible race wins. So it's been a really impressive sophomore year for Cam Hill, knocking on the door of the top 10 in the championship standings as well, which that's really impressive for a second-year driver.
Before we get into too much detail, Zach, let's get a message from our partners. Our season reviews are proudly sponsored by City Rural Insurance Brokers. City Rural, a subsidiary of the Cowden Group of companies, has over 50 years' experience supporting their clients. They offer a range of specialist insurance from heavy industry to food trucks. They are your insurance pit crew. Head to cityrural.au. So you look at the results for MSR in 2024, probably doesn't paint the most accurate picture of what that team actually achieved. I mean, Nick was 8th in the championship, Cam was 13th, equal on points with 12th, and they were 7th in the team's championship. And for a long time there, it looked like Nick could steal the top 5 in the championship, but there was a bit of a lull mid-season, and the Enduros just did not go to plan for those guys. But that race to 5th in that Adelaide finale was awesome, and it was again proof that when MSR delivers a good car, Nick's good. And again, there were moments for Cam Hill through the year they'd probably want to take back. I mean, that crash in Perth in practice was a bell ringer that, was probably flew under the radar. That was a big crash, and obviously Adelaide was spectacular. But any driver that can move forward 10 plus positions year on year in the championship is moving in the right direction, quite literally. So 2025 for MSR, there could be some things on the horizon. There might be a wildcard program that they're pretty keen to do, building new cars, new co-drivers, who knows. But the opportunity is there for these guys to steal a top 5 in the championship. I was pretty lucky to have a good chat with Matt Stone after the last race in Adelaide, and he said, look, the finals are coming in next year. Let's get both of our guys in it. Do you reckon they can do that?
I reckon they can, but there's also 22 other guys who are going to be very desperate to get into the finals, and it's going to really reinvigorate the cadence of a supercar season. There's going to be so much more to play for in the middle of the year. There's absolutely no reason why they can't do it, though. As much as Matt Stone Racing are a small race team, they're a very well-sorted race team, and I think we've seen that particularly this year. And as you said, making it to the final of the pit stop challenge, that's a really impressive feat for a small team like that. And to beat out teams like Brad Jones Racing to make that final as well. Brad Jones Racing, the acknowledged masters of pit stops for so many years now. So really interested to see how Nick Percat goes in his second year in particular, if he can carry that momentum. I feel like that 5th in the finale was a really important result for him, especially after that bit of a lull in the previous races. And as you said, the Enduros really did not go his way at all with Dylan O'Keefe. As for Cam, if he can keep on improving, then based on current trajectory, he will be inside the top 10. So that's going to be really interesting to see how he goes in his 3rd season now at Matt Stone Racing. And he had a solid Enduro campaign as well, 2 top 10 finishes with his good mate Cam Crick as well. So there's so many things to really like about Matt Stone Racing, and if they can really capitalize on those things and maybe improve on the areas that they do need to improve on, like maybe perhaps a little bit more consistency throughout a year, then they can become a force to be reckoned with and a real David versus all the Goliaths.
I think there's one stat that paints the story of Nick Percat's season is he was 13th on average in qualifying, but 9th on average in the race. So you do the maths, he was moving forward, and the overall grid, 24 drivers, on average start to average finish, he's 4th. So the guy knows how to race. I think one of the key things I look at in the off-season is qualifying these cars better, because it goes without saying, you qualify better, give yourself a better shot. But for Nick, who strongly believes he's top 5 caliber in the championship, and he was for such a long time this season, they need to qualify better. And if they can, I mean, they'll definitely snag some more wins, because you saw how easy they made it look at the Grand Prix in Tasmania. Nick could probably got out of the car and go, I always had it in me, but to qualify well, you'll race well. I think those guys with good pit stops, they can get some more wins as well.
And as much as we're talking about finding one lap pace improvements, we're not talking about much here. Like, we're regularly talking about hundredths and thousandths of a second between cars in qualifying. So you're trying to find just the smallest little margins for such big gains. And I think Adelaide at the end of the year was a prime example of that. You got guys pushing to find such small margins and making these mistakes with big consequences, like unfortunately we saw with Cam Hill at turn 8. So like as much as we try to say it's not that much to try and find a few hundredths or thousandths of a second, that could even be a driver thing. But when everyone's pushing to find those small margins, it really makes that job just that little bit more difficult to, I guess, have those results and make those gains.
Well, we'll see a lot of those stories next year, Zach. We're going to keep pressing on with our Summer Cool Down series, brought to you by City Rural Insurance Brokers.